So I've thought for a while, and I don't mean this, I don't know. I'm not involved in the team or plugged in on anybody on that program. To me, like when they first came out last year and they're hitting the whoops, and even this year in Supercross, their rebounds were so slow on the bikes. Like if you watched, they just didn't rebound. And if you watch Tomac's bike and the Lawrence brothers bikes, they have the fastest rebound. Like from my perspective, we slow-mo a lot of this stuff. And it's so easy to see on video. You can watch what the rear tire does after it leaves a jump. You literally don't need to know anything about valving or suspension specifics or anything spectacular. It's the simplest thing ever. When it goes from full compression to extension, watch how fast that happens. The Lawrence brothers and Tomac in particular run a crazy fast shock rebound, and they do outdoors too. And I think a lot of the really good outdoor guys have run that. And when I watch the KTMs, they've always been slower in the rear, especially last year. Like to me in the whoops, the back of the bike looked dead to me. And I still think this year, I think whatever the direction is on the team, that like whoever guides that direction, or maybe it's the chassis, maybe it's the bike, maybe they go the other way and things get worse. I don't know, but I agree with you. To me, the bike just doesn't look like it stays planted on the ground, driving forward as much as, for example, the Hondas currently do, the Jets currently have, and the other bikes, right? Like it looks like all this, they hate on the cow. We only have Cincerillo out there this year, but the bike looks pretty good. Granted, he's not pushing it super hard. And we're going to see with Kenny this weekend. I mean, that's actually a great point. I guess he's coming out and racing. That's correct, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He likes a fast, active bike. He always has, in a fairly soft setup. I think we're going to see his bike look really good this weekend, especially now that he's got kind of his finger on, he's got full direction, which can be good and bad, but I think he's got his finger on what he likes, what he wants. I think that's the way to go. And I just feel like KTM Husky group have not done that over the years. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
No, a light bulb went off when you said that about the rebound. Cause I'm like, Christian Craig has never, ever had a problem with whoop-de-doos, and he couldn't get through them this year. And I was thinking back, I'm like, gosh, you know what? It did kind of, I mean, he dislocated his hip in the whoops. How un-Christian Craig is that? I'm like, it's shocking to me that you nailed it with the rebound. I'm like, that might actually fix the problem. So,
yeah, I agree. And the same with Malcolm. You take two of the best guys in the whoops historically, and then now, like Malcolm, he didn't crash in them, but he was what I would call just average. He wasn't the Malcolm of old through the whoops where he was just light years better than everybody. So I'm not throwing shade on the team.
I know, but I was always kind of talked with my guys at Factory Connection that through the whoops, you wanted it to be fairly slow because you wanted the sucker to pack. So it was hit each little whoop, and it wouldn't be rebounded enough on you so that you could stay on top of them. And I'll
challenge you on this one, Johnny, to go to a track, take your iPhone out now that we have insane technology in our pockets, slow-mo version, right? Like use the high-speed camera, 120 frames, and go watch bikes through the bumps. So just slow-mo them and then go replay them and go do it through whoops. And they do it in Supercross now with the TV coverage. Occasionally you get to see the ultra slow-mo, but the bikes, the rebound never kicks you over the bars. And it's just a misconception. If you watch bumps, even in especially amateur bikes, a lot of them are too slow. They'll hit a bump. And then when you watch in slow-mo, the rear tire has not had time to recover. Like it doesn't stay on the ground, and it's never a fast enough rebound to get back. Now there's a lot more I won't get into on like the plantedness feel, but if you go take your bike, even with the very fast rebound setup, and you jump it off a 5-foot cliff, you'll bottom. And then does it kick you over the bars? No, it doesn't. Does the rear tire even leave the ground? No, it doesn't. There's not enough force remaining within that spring to throw you over the bars. So it's my personal opinion that
I appreciate it. You know, that's why we have guys on here. I've done a lot of analysis on the crash stuff, and I can guarantee I can go back that most of we're talking about Stewart and we're talking about Craig. How they crashed was either their front end missed a whoop or their ass end missed one of the whoops. And what you're saying, if that rear wheel does not see, this is one of those things where you can have a bias until you're presented with new information. And once you have new information, well, then you potentially maybe have to have the ability to change your outlook. But there have been a few cases on some of the crashes that I've gone back to where that ass end does miss one of the whoops, and then they fall into the very bottom of it. And then it doesn't matter what kind of suspension setup you have from there. If you're at the bottom of a 5-foot whoop, you're going to get something. But could that have been prevented if that ass end was a little bit faster and he would have never even missed?
Johnny, let me run this past you. Once that packs up, it gives you a different bounce from whoop to whoop. Where Tomac, if it's fast, you're getting whatever you're getting, he knows the exact kick it's getting each whoop.
Yeah, if you start packing too much, then it's like
yeah.
Of course, it's squeezing a spring.
It's gonna,
the harder you do, it's gonna.
Then you're getting off balance, possibly miss a whoop with the front or the rear.
Right. Now that I've said it, really go back and watch the Supercrosses, watch Tomac's bike, watch the Lawrence brothers bikes, watch, I think even Chase's bike. Like, to me, those guys had their suspension pretty dialed this year. And really watch Tomac's. You'll be shocked when he leaves a jump. And if you really slow-mo it, you'll see it's pretty much full travel in the shock off, close to full travel in the shock off any jump face. It's because they're using so much energy. Watch how quickly that rear tire is extended. And you'll be like, man, I almost can't even tell the separation. Like, he leaves a jump and the tire's out. You don't see it. Go watch some of the privateer bikes and watch some of the KTMs, especially early in the year. And you'll be like, holy crap, it took halfway from this jump to the next jump for that tire to come out. Or same with the whoops. Like, his tire hits a whoop and it's extended, which helps drive the front of the bike. Like, there's a little bit of a reactionary force, the weight of the wheel and some percentage of the swing arm. As it's extending out, that's what's forcing your bike forward. But it's not very heavy, right? It's not like a heavy wheel and a heavy swing arm compared to the weight of you and the bike. So it's not throwing the bike forward, but by having that rear tire extend, it does help drive the front tire into the next whoop and not miss it a little bit easier. And then the faster you go through whoops, the more important that becomes, right? Because you need the recovery to happen more quickly. So that's just kind of how I view it. But I would say go back and watch, and you'll be shocked. Like, when I really started cluing in on this, maybe last year when Tomac went to Yamaha, I'm like, holy crap, he's got a fast rebound compared to his competition. And also his Supercross bike, he's the only Yamaha guy doing this. I don't even think him and Dylan are on the same components. When you look at the bikes, they're different. But like, Tomac's forks have like the first 4 inches are like really cushy, which is weird for a Supercross bike, but they're really cushy. And I've never seen a bike like that. I've never seen a bike that's so cushy for Supercross, but it's almost like he's honed in on something.
I thought he was having almost, hey, human, appreciate the subscription. Because we saw him lose his hands on the handlebars a few times in Supercross. And to me, that is like you're hitting a hard part in the forks to jar your hands off.
Right. So I think he runs, the only way I could come up with how his forks work, if I were to mechanically try to make it from my end, because normally, like, valving is not position sensitive, what most people think it is. It's literally just speed sensitive. So that's how all valving works.
What do you mean by that? By somebody that's
so like
dumbass?
If you jump into water and you're in the 2-foot deep section and you're just on the side of it, your feet are going to go through and hit the bottom of the pool, right? Almost no resistance. That's because you hit the water with no speed. Now go up to a 10-foot or a 20-foot platform and jump into the water. You might go down 5 or 6 feet, but you're going to smack it pretty hard. That is a velocity sensitive type reaction. So the faster you hit a fluid, the more resistance it provides to you. So like in your suspension, they're way past the days of like holes determining how much fluid flow goes through. Now they have shiv stacks and things that control the size of the hole based upon velocity. But essentially, if you plot suspension damping versus velocity, it looks like a straight linear line. It does not ramp up x squared. It's just a straight linear line. So when you hit a bump at, let's just make up numbers, at 1, you're going to get 1 damping. When you hit a bump at 2, you're going to get 2 damping. Now you can change that curve shape. So like instead of being a slope of 1, which would be 1x, you could make it 2x or 3x or half x. That's what valving does. But then where does the position sensitivity come in? So that's your oil height and then a little bit your springs. Your springs are position sensitive, right? Meaning like, okay, the harder and farther I compress them, the more I get out of my spring. So like the only way Tomac could have the top of his stroke look noticeably different than the later parts is I think they're running like a twin spring setup, like a really soft spring stacked on top of a stiffer spring. So it gives that initial like very softness. And then they may be running, like in trophy trucks, they have what's called bypass.
So what you're
shocks.
saying is it's literally a hybrid spring where half of it is made of
stiff and soft,
stiffer, and then the.
Could it be just a progressive spring?
Well, that would be that's the same exact thing, but a stacked spring combination is more tunable and a wider range. So it works out the same way, but you could do stacked springs and get better results. So trophy trucks have done this forever. Go look at trophy trucks. They have 2 springs stacked on each other. They have independent preload on each spring. So you can tension each spring like between rings, and then you end up with whatever progressive rate you want. But that's correct. It's like a progressive spring, but also like, let's say his damping's that way too. Now that's really hard to do because damping normally is just speed sensitive. So how could they make, let's say, the first 3 or 4 inches of his stroke potentially considerably different damping than later in the stroke. And so trophy trucks do what's called bypass damping. And like, imagine if you had your shock adjuster, but you were able to put them in different portions of your shock. They have these little tubes that go around. So like they can isolate.
Progressive dampening then, essentially.
Not damping. It's not progressive. It's position sensitive. So like a trophy truck says, hey, the first 4 inches are this damping rate. The middle 4 inches, now they have like 4 feet of travel, but there's a different damping rate. Like they have different shim stacks for different parts of the stroke, but they do it externally on the shock. So like you can see it very clearly. Maybe you could Google like a King trophy truck shock real quick, and we can pull it up in the picture real quick. But how you would do that in a fork, to me, I don't have any clue, because you have packaging constraints. Like you have a problem being able to package that. But if they have come up with some form of bypass damping, I would say that's super innovative. I think it's working for him in Supercross, because I feel like one of the challenges of Supercross that you see the KTM struggle with is the front end doesn't
$7 grand. They're only $7 grand.
So see those little tubes on the outside? Each one of those tubes is a different circuit for a different portion of the stroke.
Okay, I have to talk for a little bit for it to pop up on my screen, just the way the Zoom is here. But Derek is talking about this, and then these little guys that are all up on there. That's crazy that they've got that many different canisters.
And it's infinite. Like you could put 50 of them if you wanted and have it different for every inch of the stroke. So like that's how they've done it. I've
never noticed that, because you could literally see like, hey, they're positioned in different spots.
Correct.
Too, to give it just like what you're saying.
Right. So none of this stuff would be new, but it would be innovative and applied if it was applied in moto. And I really think they've done something like that. I don't know how they've done it, but when you watch those forks, it's like they've solved some challenges of a Supercross bike. The front end dives so he can corner. Like he actually has some compliancy on those little tiny chatter bumps that they get into turns. Whereas you watch the KTMs, those things are so stiff in the front end. And I feel like so was Anderson's bike this year. Man, his front end was stiff compared to Tomac's.
Derek, let me ask you this. Do you think that this at all contribute to having that front end be a little bit too soft? And maybe they're doing that with the rear shock then too. And maybe could potentially have caused his Achilles tendon to break, where it was real soft, and then now his feet go down even further because they're absorbing because of how soft that first initial few inches are. And then he hits the real hard stroke, but he's already gone further than where he would normally have gone.
Right. So if you think of damping as an energy management system, the best analogy I can ever give anybody is if I were to throw an egg to you and say, don't break it, catch it, please. All right. So if I threw it to you slow, that'd be pretty easy. You could catch the egg and it wouldn't be hard not to break. But the faster I throw that egg, the harder it becomes to catch it and not break it. And that's what suspension is trying to do, is we need to create a suspension setup that can both take the slow throw of the egg and take the fast throw of the egg. So not bottom, not break the egg, but at the same time, not feel stiff when it's a slow throw or, too soft on a fast throw. That's the challenge of suspension. Suspension is managing 12 inches of travel. So we have 12 inches no matter what we do to the bike. So that means that if I have a 13-inch bump, no matter what I do, the tire will leave the ground. I cannot absorb it. It's physically impossible. And then how do we maximize that over a big jump? So when Tomac landed that jump, he slightly overjumped, if I remember right, which is actually something that he's done all year long. Like you had done a video on that about, like, hey, his factory level suspension, look at this overjump, look at how he can just face this next jump. And that's true. He's also just a beast. I think if you put an average 10th place guy out there and you put them in that scenario, they just collapse on that next face. Like they don't have the strength that he has. And I don't mean to talk down on those guys. I just think Tomac's a freak of nature when it comes to overall strength. But those are the things that, so yeah, he might have had by making that compromise in suspension, the top 4 inches of travel and his forks being a little bit softer means that the next 8 inches have to be way stiffer to manage that energy that you've not damped out yet. So it might have been a contributing factor. The fact that he overjumped, the fact that he was on the balls of the seat, which he really should be, but in that instance, maybe not. And then, he's old, unfortunately. Like that's why I think we've seen people retire before he did. His body is not 25, so that was just an unfortunate, very
the
sad
average
deal.
retirement of superstars has been around 26, but there is a changing of the guard with a bunch of guys being over